Welcome to My Life, Tanya Applied, with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, a journey into the deepest teachings of Torah and their application to our personal, emotional, and psychological lives.
A good tavach, a good week. We continue our journey in the life-changing Sefer HaTanya. This program is made possible by Rena Lights LLC, and it is in honor and memory of Yosef Halevi Weinberg Olav Hashalom, of Bishop Pinchas HaKohen Katz Olav Hashalom, Rabbi El HaKohen Khan Olav Hashalom. It's also in schus and merit of Rab Zev Yecheskel HaKohen and Risha Katz L'Eidech Yomim V'Shanim Tevis for many long, healthy years. So we are in chapter 12, the Beinoni, and specifically the power that a Beinoni has, which really means the power that each human being has, each one of us has, because Midas HaBeinoni is Midas Kol Adam, is the personality of every person. We're not talking about a tzaddik now, which is a unique type of strength. This everyone has, and that's why it's so critical, and in many ways it's the central theme of all of Tanya, Sefer Shel Beinoni. And what is this power that he has? We know we've defined what the Beinoni is. Person who controls his thought, speech, and action, even though the faculties of the animal soul are active. The different levels of activity. During davening, they're more dormant and asleep. But they're active, and therefore they've not been transformed, and they have a voice. However, the voice is not enough to govern the thought, speech, and action of the person. The divine soul controls that. So for all practical purposes, it's like an opposition voice, but who's governing? When I say governing, I mean the thought, speech, and action. That's the divine soul. But there is a voice. There are emotions in the left side of the heart of the animal soul that desire and crave for the worldly pleasures and for selfish needs, for what the animal soul wants. That's what we established. So what gives this Beinoni the power to do so? And the answer is Moyach Shalat Ala Lev. And to use again, it's so important to Moyach Shalat Ala Lev, and perhaps that's why the Alter Rebbe brings Commissioner Kosa Bezer Pasha Pinchas bringing the source, perhaps because it's such a fundamental piece here. That what? Betel Dose V'Tevi Yitzirose. That the Alter Rebbe's addition. That it's natural. Shekol Odom Yochel B'Ritzein Eshebe Meche. That it's natural and inherent. This capacity for the mind ruling the heart, meaning the reflective mind to control the impulsive heart. Or in other words, the divine soul which resides in the mind and the right side of the heart to control with the left side of the heart and the passions and desires, impulses of the animal soul. This is how man is formed at birth. We explained both. He says here both that betel dose v'tevi yitzirasi. You could have something at birth. That's not necessarily your nature. We have many things that are part of our birth. For example, the shape, the size of different organs, and so on. But it's also tevi yitzirasi. And again, he adds, betel dose. That's how a human being was shaped. It's completely inherent. It's not acquired. This is critical because the impulses of the animal soul are inherent. So how could the acquired skill that you're trained to do through education and other means and disciplines be more powerful? But once it's Netzer B'Tevi Yitzirase and Netzer Adam B'Tel Dose, then it gives you actual natural power. Now you have to exercise it. But now we have the Beinoni's competitive edge, so to speak. Shekol Adam, and he explains what it means. Shekol Adam Yochel B'Ritzein Shebe Meche L'Sapek U'Limshel B'Ruach Tevoshe Shebelivei. This means that every person, Kol Adam, every person can, with the willpower of his mind, restrain himself and take control of his heart's urges and desires. Shaloi Lamales, and furthermore, in the Indian, further words to explain it. Shaloi Lamales Meshailas Liboy, so as to prevent the heart's desires from being fulfilled or actualized or enacted, b'maisa dibur machshava, in action, in word, in dibur spoken or contemplated upon. So not just one of the garments, all of the garments, which again explains the Beinani that all three garments are in control. That's what the person has. Going back to the example of the two kings over controlling the city, so this king, called the divine soul, has this type of power. The Moich Shaltav, that's his edge over the other melech. The melech Zaken Uchsil of the animal soul. So the first thing he says, to restrain. Lisapik. Ulimshal beruach. So the words are very precise here. We're going to go over them now in detail. To restrain himself, Lisapik, Ulimshal beruach. And to control, to dominate, beruach taivasya shebelive, over the spirit, the heart's desires. Ulasiach daite. So what does he do? In his mind and his heart, meaning his intellect and his mind, we're talking the faculties, not the garments, not thought, speech, and action, are actively stating their voice. And what is their voice? The desires of the heart are interested in a physical pleasure, whatever the pleasure may be. The mind is thinking, wants to think, I should say. The mind is ready to concentrate on the fulfillment of that desire. So what's he technically do? He has the ability to control it. But the bottom line is, machshava mishetat is tomid, which means the thought of a person is always turning. He can't just close off his thoughts. So he says, so what he does is, and this is how the Moich Shal Talev is now, he's not talking the dynamics, how Moich Shal Talev, self-control, comes into play, is activated, and to divert his attention completely, legamri, mitayvus libi, from the heart's urges or desires, elahepech legamri, to something completely different, to the opposite. This doesn't necessarily mean to Kedusha, as we'll see in a moment, to the opposite. So your heart is desiring something, your mind can come into play, moyach shal talalev, and the mind not only stops those desires, it changes its position. It diverts. What do you start reading? You start reading something in math. You start thinking about something in mathematics, something in your business, something in your family. It doesn't have to be necessarily a mitzvah or holy, but it's not the heart's desires of the animal soul. So what you see here is a unique power that a human being was given. To really drive the point home, let's compare it. Think of an animal, not a human being. An animal. Does an animal have Moich Shal Talev? Absolutely not. They have what's called Seichel HaNikne, Das HaNikne, intelligence, how to hunt, how to breed, how to protect their children. But if an animal is hungry and it needs to eat, you can't come and say to it, hey, you know what? Let's push it off. Today's Yom Kippur. Because that's how the animal's wired to go eat right then, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's why you can't prosecute an animal for hunting prey. That's how it's created. And the same thing is with all species. A human being, because I have a desire. Why am I not like the animal that I have no choice? You have to eat in general. Yes, a human being can't go 3 days without eating. Well, the halachas that talk about eating and drinking go longer. But to not eat altogether, no. But you have the power to divert. You have the power to control. So it's 2 steps. To control, he says, to restrain yourself and control that desire, and lasir daite, to divert your mind to something else. Why does it say hepech? Because he wants to take it away from the animal soul. It goes from one animal soul's desire to another. Is not the kavan here. It's not the intention. Okay. So you see this unique power called Moich Shal Talev. And I believe I said in the previous year, to drive the point even further home, by contrast, sometimes we're going to talk about Yisrael and Acheshach. You want to appreciate the Torah perspective, the Tanya perspective. Let's look at another perspective. That the Torah, you see its wisdom, that everybody can see its wisdom. So even though Chachma Bagoyim Tamin, there is the concept of wisdom among the nations, but still the Torah wisdom, the Torah psychology. Compare it to Freudian thinking. Freudian thinking, the id is the driving force. Yes, there's an ego and a superego that can impose and can control red lights and green lights to coexist. But inherent to the person is a selfish pleasure principle, as he puts it. And it's inherent. And any self-control is either acquired, or even if it's not totally acquired, but it's not what he says in Tanya here. So the id, that's who you really are at heart. Especially if you add the evolutionary biological theory, that we've evolved. We're essentially animals, and the mind has developed, but it hasn't taken away the natural, essential personality of the person, which is why selfishness is inherent. But you don't have anything to counter it. The Torah says a human being was created b'tzelem Elokim, the divine image. It's not the id, it's the yid, the pinta yud, the spark that's even deeper and more inherent. Not just equal. Moyach shal ta'alev. So the divine soul has a competitive edge, as something powerful that can dominate. It could dominate. You have to activate it. The fact that you see people give in to the whims of their desires of the animal soul is because they're not activating the inherent power. We'll talk about this later as we go further in Tanya. So this drives home the point, the chiddush of the Alter Rebbe here. Especially the words when he adds, B'teva teldose. B'teldose b'teva yitzirose, I should say. Shekol adam yochel, yeah. B'teva yitzirose, shekach neitzra adam b'teldose. Okay. Now he goes and further. Ubefrat el tzad ha'kedusha. It's not only to control and restrain the desires of the heart, to not affect the thought, speech, and action of the person, and on the contrary, to masiyach das, to divert the mind, and to divert the heart, for that matter, to something of the opposite. And as I said, it could be anything. It could be scientific, it could be mathematics, it could be work, business. But ubefrat al tzad ha'kedusha. Of course, this is critical because we want to have it not just a neutral. So again, you've neutralized the animal soul in this sense from actualizing in thought, speech, and action. But remember, the divine soul is kedusha. It's toward godliness. So he says, "Ubefrat al tzad ha'kedusha." Because remember, it's coming from the divine soul. So now, we've taken it all the way the other direction, and therefore, understanding what he says earlier in Tanya, why the divine soul is the dominant force that controls thought, speech, and action. On the lower levels, it's to restrain and control the desires of the animal soul, and to move your mind towards something else, divert to something else. But ultimately, b'frat al tzad ha'kedusha, to things that are godly, to the purpose of your existence. Okay. Now, just before we continue, the next thing he's going to do is bring a raya for this. Kediksiv. Doesn't say ukediksiv, kediksiv like it says. A raya from a pasuk. But there's also a logic I wanted to add to this. Someone will say, how do we know it's inherent? The Alter Rebbe says it. The Zohar says, maybe that is something that comes through education, through acquired. Besides the proof from the pasuk, there's also a practical proof. We see it b'pel mamish. Took a little child, something disturbs the child, they can have a tantrum. And you can't speak to them, you can't insist, because even though, so you can make the argument even stronger, maybe it only comes as we're adults. But when we become adults and something hurts us, it doesn't require a whole Aveda not to have a tantrum. It's true there's some adults that behave like children. because they're not allowing the Moich Shal to live. But you see a person who is in self-control, it doesn't require a whole Aveda, a whole battle. You see it, it's easy. As soon as you decide you don't want to do something in public, for example, you're not going to have a tantrum because it doesn't pass. A child won't have that self-control. An adult does. So self-control does not require a whole army and a whole strategy. It may be difficult because the desire of the heart is very powerful. But once you exercise it, you realize it's a faculty within you. It's not like you have to go buy it and so on. Again, you may need help to activate it because we're not objective once we have a subjective desire. But here's the proof the Alter Rebbe brings. Just wanted to add that into the equation. Kediksiv, and let's continue reading Kediksiv. This pasuk is in Kehelis, Beis Yud Gimel, 2:13. So in Kehelis, Beis Yud Gimel, he says like this: Kediksiv, V'ri'isi, Shlomo Melech says, V'ri'isi sheyesh yisra in the chachma min hasichlos. Ki yisra na'er min hacheshech. And I saw that there's an advantage to wisdom over folly or over stupidity. Chachma, wisdom over sichlus, like the advantage of light over darkness. So this is Ecclesiastes, Kehelis 2:13. Now, to say that wisdom is superior to stupidity, you don't need a proof from a verse. Everyone accepts that. And he says, very easy. Mishlema HaMelech is telling us something. But what he's adding, he's comparing it to the superiority and advantage of light over darkness. And as the Alter Rebbe explains that this is the Chiddush. How and in what manner is this superiority, is this advantage? Not just that it's a fact. It's like light over darkness. What's the Chiddush of light over darkness? This is amazing stuff. He says like this. Pirush, Alter Rebbe is explaining. Just like light has an advantage, he says, not just Yisrin, the pasuk is Yisrin, with shlita memshala, control and dominance over darkness. What does that mean? And here we're going to see all the aspects of every detail that we've discussed. Shema'at eir gashmi. Talking about physical light. In that a small amount of physical light doicha harbe min hacheshech will push aside and dispel harbe min hacheshech. So it's not even equal. The light is very little, the darkness is very much. Bekamus, be'echus, quantity, quality. But it has that power to dispel and push away a lot of darkness. And in what manner does it do so? Does it do it with an effort? Does it require power? Force? No. There's no struggle between them. It is displaced automatically and effortlessly. Me'elov u'memela. Which is, in another way of saying, is betevi yitzirase. It's this very natural, inherent power that light has. Doesn't need any effort. Doesn't need any additional force. To drive the point home, let's compare it again. What's the comparison? Let's take fire and water. Fire and water are also two adversarial forces. They can't live side by side. Not talking about without a miracle. Enough fire will evaporate large bodies of water. Enough water will extinguish even a large fire. But there, it's not a little water. A little water will not be able to deal with a lot of fire. Could do a little, and the other way around. And it's a battle. Not only, it's not a little water, they need to have a lot of power, a lot of water to extinguish a big fire. And vice versa. But it's also not automatic. It's a battle. You see it. God forbid when there's a fire and you have to put out a fire, the fire is big enough, as much water as you put, it can take a lot more, and it can go back and forth until you really until you really extinguish the fire, and vice versa. Fire over water. So it's a battle. Light and dark are not made that way. It could be a very dark room, a large dark room. Bring in a little flame, a little candle. That area, automatically the darkness will be dispelled. It's not like the darkness puts up a fight. However, it's a very dark room, you need more light, because not enough light to illuminate the entire room. But the area where light comes, it's like he says, Me'elov u'memela. That's Yisur Ne'er min ha'cheshech. Now that the verse compares Yisur Ne'choch min ha'sichlos, so now he says, the Alter Rebbe continues, Kach nitche. Memela, so too in the same way, you dispel automatically. Memela, sichlos harbe, like you said, cheshech harbe. Harbe min ha'cheshech. A lot, much of folly or stupidity, which the stupidity is coming from, shall haklipa v'sitra achra. Now he's going back immediately to the nefesh ha'bamis, which we learned earlier in chapter 6 and on. Comes from klipa sitra achra, the shell, and the other side, which resides where? Shebachal hasmali, resides on the left side of the heart. So the Alter Rebbe is now concentrating all of this. Yes, he could have just talked about wisdom and folly, wisdom and stupidity alone, but he wants to bring it back to the topic at hand, which is the divine soul, the animal soul. But in truth, this is in general wisdom. That's the Shlomo HaMelech doesn't say necessarily Chochmah of Torah or Kedusha. It says Chochmah over Sichlos. But we said Befrat Atzad HaKedusha because we're talking about the divine soul. So it's not just in general how the mind has dominance over the desires of the heart, of the impulsive. The reflective mind is in control of the impulsive heart. He's bringing it back all the way to the theme at hand. And that is control over what? So too is dispelled and pushed away. A lot, sichlos harbe, even if it's a lot, that comes from the klipa and sitra achre of the left side of the heart. And what pushes it away? He's going to say in a few lines, I'm going to read it soon, but I just go, from the wisdom of the divine soul that resides in the mind, as he explained in chapter 9. So now we use Chochmah and Sichlus, is the Chochmah being where the divine soul resides in the reflective mind. Sichlus is the animal soul residing in the impulsive heart, left side of the heart. And Kiyusar Ne'er min ha'cheshech, just like light, even a little light can dispel, and dispels, pushes away a lot of darkness. So the reflective mind of the divine soul pushes away even a lot of sichlus. He doesn't say ma'at chochmah from nefesh alikis, but it's obvious that it's the same idea. The most likely why he doesn't say it, because it's not really ma'at, because even a little chochmah of the nefesh alikis in echus is more than a little. In a sense, we could say even a little light qualitatively is a lot because it could dispel a lot of darkness. The point here is, however, that it could be a lot of desires of the animal soul. So here comes another chidush in this, is that even if it's a lot, you could say, you know what? The natural tendency, what's inherent to us, self-control, is when the animal soul has regular desires. But if it's a lot of desires and they overpower, like let's say in the city, the other king, the animal soul is suddenly doing a surge, it's going on the offense, you won't be able to. So you see here, no. That even if it's a lot, sichlos harbe, there's a lot, either a lot quantitatively or qualitatively, meaning many different desires. The animal soul has gone wild. And the desires are very powerful and intense. No, you have inside you a natural ability called Me'ech Shal Ta'alev. And the divine soul can exercise and use that to dispel and push to say, Deiche harbe min ha'cheshech. Like we said before, what means deich? He's not transforming the darkness. The darkness is pushed away. Like he said, Masiach daite. You have ability to restrain yourself and to push aside, like he said, to push aside those desires to something completely opposite. What would be opposite here is light. And especially Tzad HaKedusha, the light of the divine soul. That's what he's saying here. So you have an exact proof, precise proof from the Pasuk in Kehelis. Now, continuing. Wants to bring a raya. How do we know that sichlus is associated, stupidity is associated with the animal soul? We see animal souls can be very shrewd and very manipulative and very smart in their needs. So he brings a raya in the brackets. Kemaimer Razal Elim ken nichnus by ruach shtus. Ein Adam Ever Aveda, says the Gemara in Seita. Gimel Amar Aleph. Seita is the Masechta we learn between Pesach and Shavuos these days. So right in the beginning of Seita, he says, 3a, a man will not commit a sin unless Elim ken nichnus by ruach shtus. The Alter Rebbe doesn't bring the first half because it's self-understood, and the focus he wants is on the ruach shtus. To say the animal souls are ruach shtus, even when you don't do an aveda, it's a ruach shtus. It's when the aveda is done, and here we're not talking about it doing an aveda, because remember meich shal ta'alev. But even the aveda is not done, the animal soul is by etzem a ruach shtus, which can be translated ruach shtus literally a moment of insanity, a spirit, a delusional spirit, spirit of folly. Nichnas by ruach shtus. So you see from this that sichlus, shtus, folly, stupidity is associated with the animal soul. And who pushes it away? This is automatically and naturally dispelled by the wisdom of the divine soul found in the mind, as we learned before. Asher etzene limsha levada be'ir. Now the Alter Rebbe is tying it all together, and whose desire is to have exclusive control of the small city. The king that wants control of the exclusive control, and to express itself and manifest itself in the three garments as mentioned above, thought, speech, and action. Throughout the entire body, as mentioned above. So through the garments, all the garments are in control, and this affects the entire body, because those garments are the garments of the body. The irktana is the guf, the body is the city. Who's in control? So even though there is a voice of the animal soul, but who's governing is the divine soul. Namely, that this is the thought, speech, and action of the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah mentioned above. Interesting, he says here 3 times li'il, aniskarim li'il, keniska li'il, keniska li'il. Because he's tying all together these points. And there we have the Beinoni's power, of meich shal ta'alev. Tremendous example that really all of us can relate to. The light and dark is something we see all the time. And that's who you are. Your natural light in you can any time dispel darkness naturally and automatically, but you have to allow it in. You have to allow it to speak, your divine soul. So we'll stop here. Everyone have a good tavach. TanyaApplied.com is where this and all these programs can be seen, as well as other resources that you can find, Hasidic resources. Everyone be well. All truth.
This has been My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Please join us again next week. Visit HasidusApplied.com for archived classes and more resources.